I didn't cry when the doctor confirmed A was pregnant. I didn't cry when I called me father and heard his voice crack with disappointment. I didn't even cry when Nate disappeared, leaving me with nothing but silence and an ultrasound photo. But I cried when the train pulled into the Willamette Valley station and I saw the man I was supposed to marry waiting on the platform with a brown paper bag and a bouquet of wildflowers. Like this was normal. Like I hadn't just straightened my entire future. For a stranger's skinness. His name was Caleb Morrison, 37, quiet, a vineyard owner. And according to my father, a good, God-fearing man who won't ask too many questions. That last part mattered most. My father didn't care that I'd once dreamed of becoming a field archaeologist. He didn't care that I had a thesis half-niched, or that the child inside me had been conceived in amment of naive trust. All he saw was scandal and a chance to bury it. You'll marry him, Sophie, my father had said. It's the only honorable path left. I hadn't known what honor felt like in weeks. I only knew exhaustion and shame and the quiet desperation of a woman cornered by a world that refused to bend. Caleb wasn't what I expected. He didn't smile too much. He didn't touch me, he didn't speak unless necessary. But he did take my suitcase without a word and walk me to his dusty old truck. He opened the door for me. I drove in silence through winding country roads past rows of vineyards stretching into the horizon, their leaves just beginning to turn golden in the late summer sun. There was music playing softly, an old jazz tune I think, but I barely heard it over the pounding in my chest. His house was simple. A white front porch, chipped white paint, and a hammock swaying between two trees. A dog barked once and then trotted out to greet us, tail wagging. Caleb said, "This is June." Then led me inside like he'd done this 100 times. Before, we didn't talk much that FRST evening. He showed me to a guest room. His sister's old room, he said, and left me there with clean sheets and a picture of water. I stood in the center of thatch room, surrounded by lavender wallpaper in silence, and wonder how the hell my life had ended up here. That night, I couldn't sleep. The baby wasn't even showing yet, but I could feel its presence like a weight pressing against me ribs. I lay on my side, one hand resting gently over my stomach, and whispered a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'll figure this out. I swear I will. You won't grow up unloved." The next morning, Caleb made scrambled eggs and toast. He didn't ask if I liked them. He didn't try to make a conversation. He just placed the plate in front of me and poured a cup of coffee like we've been doing this for years. I said, "Thank you." He nodded once and that was it. Days passed like that, slow, quiet and oddly bearable. I stayed out of his way. He didn't press. I started writing again. Not my thesis, but letters to the baby. I kept them in a small notebook I never let out of my sight. They weren't full of wisdom or poetry, just pieces of me, pieces I didn't want to forget. One evening as I sat on the back porch watching the sunset over rows of Merlot vines, Caleb joined me. He didn't say a word for a long time. Then finally he asked, "Do you want to be here, Sophie?" I didn't know what to say. The truth was no, but also yes, or maybe something in between. "I don't know," I whispered. "But thank you for letting me stay anyway." He nodded again, that quiet note off his, like he understood more than held it on. Like he'd been broken once too and had learned how to live with it. That was the first night I slept without crying. I wasn't used to the quiet. In Boston, even at night, the city hummed, subways, sirens, distant voices spilling out of bars. But here in Willamette Valley, silence wasn't just a background sound. It had shape, weight, depth. It pressed against the windows. At night, an echo wet in the spaces between conversations. At first, it made me feel even more alone. Then it started to feel like space to breathe. Caleb worked from sun up to sundown. I'd wake to the sound of boots and gravel, the sprinklers in the vineyard, the low rumble of the truck disapparating down the dirt path. Hadn't asked me to help. Didn't expect anything of me, and maybe that was what unsettled me most. After a lifetime offering to meet someone's expectations, I didn't know what to do with kindness that asked for nothing in return. His job June was the FRST to warm up to me. She followed me everywhere, into the kitchen, around the porch, even into the vineyard when I wandered a little too for one afternoon and lost my sense of direction among the rows of vines. Caleb found me there, staring blankly at the horizon. He didn't scold me, just handed me a water bottle and said, "It's easy to get turned around in the fields. Happens to me too." That night, I started noticing the little things. The way he always left the porch light on, even though I never came in late. The way he folded his laundry with that precision of someone used to doing everything himself. The fact that he always made 2 cups of coffee even before I was awake. There was a rhythm of this life. Slow, predictable, gem-line a way I wasn't used to. My father's world had been one of sermons and order where everything had its place and any deviation was sin. My world with Nate had been adrenaline and chaos, weekend road trips, spontaneous decisions, promises whispered too quickly. But this thesis was different. Still, I hadn't let myself settle. I slept in the guest room. I kept my bags half packed. I told myself every night, this isn't permanent, you're just passing through. But every morning I stayed. A week into me stay, Caleb's sister came by. Her name was Erin, and she was nothing like him. Talkative, warm, and full of energy that flooded the whole kitchen within seconds. So you're Sophie, she said, setting down a grocery bag. You're prettier than Caleb described. It blinked. He described me. She laughed in his way, which means he said. You were quiet, respectful, seemed smart. That shy praise coming from him. Erin didn't pry. She didn't ask why I was there or whose baby I was carrying. She just talked about harvest season, about their parents, about the time Caleb tried to make his own wine in college and nearly blew up the shed. I found myself smiling, actually smiling. And for a brief moment, I didn't feel like a burden or a problem. To be hidden. After Erin left, Caleb found me in the kitchen, rinsing berries she'd brought from her garden. He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, a hint of amusement in his eyes. She talks a lot, he said. I like her, I replied. She makes things feel normal. Caleb didn't respond right away. Then he said, yeah, it's normal. It hit me harder than I expected. I turned away, pretending to focus on the sink, blinking too fast. That night, I moved my suitcase into the closet. I didn't unpack it yet, but I tucked it out of sight. The vineyard started to feel less like a backdrop and more like a place that breathed aligned. U.S. I didn't know much about grapevines or irrigation or pruning, but I watched Caleb work from the kitchen window. Steady, focused, unbothered by the heat or the ache-off routine. One morning, I asked if I could help. He looked up from his notebook where he was mapping rows and ripening stitches. You don't have to, he said. I want to, I replied. That was enough. Handed me a pair of gloves and showed me how to check the under leaves for signs of mildew. We didn't talk much. I liked that. I liked that I could exist without filling the air. I liked the way Caleb glanced at me now and then, not to check up on me, but like he was just making sure I was still real. That I hadn't drifted off like a morning. Fogged out, we worked side by side for an hour before he broke the silence. You're good at this, he said. I raised an eyebrow, inspecting leaves, advertising things. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I smiled. And for once, it wasn't forced. Later that afternoon, I baked. It wasn't something I did often back home, but Erin had left a crate of fresh peaches on the porch, and I needed something to do with me hands. The kitchen fled with warm sugar and cinnamon, and for a brief minute, I felt almost like myself again, whoever that was now. When I brought that cobbler to Caleb, he didn't say a word, just took one bite, paused, and said, You sure you're not secretly Southern? It made me laugh out loud. Too loud, maybe? But he smiled the sound. A real smile, and I realized I hadn't seen many of those from him yet, but I wanted to. That evening, we sat on the back porch, the cobbler dish between us. June curled at Caleb's feet. The sky was stirring pink and lavender, and the vineyard shimmered in the soft gold of late summer. Caleb spoke first. Why anthropology? I blinked. No one had asked me that in months. I wanted to understand people, I said. How they lived, what they believed. What they left behind. I like the idea that even when we're gone, the way we live still tells a story. I nodded slowly. You ever think about what story you're telling now? I stared at them, the question hanging between us like smoke. I didn't know what story I was telling. I only knew what I was trying to leave behind. That night, something shifted. Not loudly, not obviously. But I went to bed thinking of Caleb's hands stained with grape dust and soil. The way they moved with intention, I dreamed of warm earth and quiet strength. 2 days later, I collapsed in the field. It was sudden. 1 second, I was standing, reaching for a branch, and the next, I was on my knees, the world tilting sideways. My skin went cold, my breath caught. My hand flew to my stomach and panic footed every inch of me. Caleb was there in seconds. I don't remember that drive to the clinic. I remember his arm around me in the truck, the way he kept saying, "Breathe, Sophie. Just breathe." I remember his voice shaking when Hess shouted for a nurse. I remember his hand gripping mine too tightly as we waited for the monitor to FND a heartbeat. And then there it was, a soft, steady thump, strong, alive. I cried for the first time in weeks, cried into the crook of Caleb's shoulder as the nurse left East alone. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "It shouldn't have been out there that long. It's not your fault," he said, his voice low rough. "Just don't scare me like that again." I didn't know what scared him more, losing me or the fact that Hem I already cared too much. It started with a letter, no return address, just me name, Sophie Chandler, scrolled across the front in the same messy handwriting I used to FND charming. I found it tucked into the mailbox one morning. Wedged between a produce fire and Anadis about an irrigation inspection. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. It was Nate. He said he was sorry that he'd been deployed when I called that. He hadn't known how to respond. By the time he could think straight, too much time had passed. Hess said he heard through a friend that I'd gone somewhere out west, but I was trying to start over. He said he wanted to talk, but he missed me, that I was safe. I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer next to sink. I didn't tell Caleb, but something in me cracked. The baby was moving more now. Little flutters that sometimes Madden gasp or smile or cry without warning, Caleb noticed. He started leaving extra pillows on the couch, letting me sleep longer in the mornings, making sure there was always something cold in the fridge in case I felt nauseous. He never hovered. He just adjusted quietly, thoughtfully. One afternoon, I found him sitting the trellis near the back fence, and I brought him a glass of lemonade. He took it, nodding thanks, and said, "You've been quiet lately." "I've been thinking." He didn't press, just sipped his drink and went back to hammering. He almost wished he would ask that he'd meant to know what I was thinking. But Caleb wasn't like that. I started dreaming about Nate, not the real Nate, the one who ghosted me the second he saw with pink lines, but the version I used to love, the one who made me feel alleviant, bold, and wanted. I hated myself for it. Hated how the mind could be so cruel. Resurrecting ghosts in the middle of something good. And then he showed up. I was walking back from the general store, the sun beating down through the trees when I heard my name. I froze. Hess stepped out from behind a parked truck like he'd rehearsed it. "Sophie." I turned it hard in my throat. Nate looked the same, maybe thinner. More tired around the eyes, but still Nate. Still the man I once trusted with everything. "What are you doing here?" I asked, too shocked to hide the tremble in my voice. "I had to see you." He stepped closer. I took a step back. "You shouldn't be here. I needed to explain. I messed up." I panicked. I was scared. And I didn't know how to deal with everything. But I never stopped thinking about you. "Yeah, stopped calling. That's what you did." Half-inched, I know I deserve that, but I went to make it right. I stared at him. The words felt thin, rehearsed, like an actor trying to recover a scene already ruined. "I'm pregnant," I said fatly. "I'm living with someone else. He's not the father, but he's the one who stayed." Nate blinked like he hadn't prepared for it. "Do you love him?" "I don't know yet, but I trust him and he trusts me." "I can do better," Nate said. "I want to step up, be there for you, for the baby. We could leave this place, start over." Something in my chest twisted. The over, the fantasy, the version of life I once clung to like a lifeline, it was right there. But so was the memory of Cal brushing me to the clinic, of him standing outside the bathroom with tea when I got sick, of the way he looked at me like I was more than the sum of my mistakes. "I'll think about it," I said, and I hated how much I meant it. I didn't tell Caleb about seeing Nate, not that night. Not the next morning. I kept it buried beneath chores and polite conversation, beneath the sound of clinking dishes and the creak of the birch swing. But the lie festered. It grew roots in my chest, twisting tighter every time Caleb looked at me with those quiet, steady eyes, the ones that always saw more than he ever said. And then Nate came back. He didn't call, didn't try, just drove up the gravel driveway like he belonged there, like this was still his story to finish. I was in the kitchen when I heard the crunch of tires and stone, followed by the engine cutting off. June barked once, then fell silent. I stepped outside, heart pounding, and there he was. standing by his car with that same crooked smile he used when he thought charm could fix everything. Caleb came out a second later, wiping his hands on a towel. Eyes narrowing as took in the stranger on his property. Sophie, Nate called out, "Can we talk?" I glanced at Caleb, who said nothing. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Nate stepped forward. "I need to say this in person." "I owe you that much." "No," Caleb said simply. Not loud, not threatening, just FRM, you owe her peace. "That doesn't mean showing up," he invited. "I'm not here to start anything," Nate replied, raising his hand slightly. "I just want to talk to the mother of my child." The words sliced through the air. Caleb turned to me. "Do you want him here?" My mouth opened, but no words came out. "I'll leave if you ask me to," Nate added, his voice softer now. "But please, Sophie, don't make this decision with throwing me out." The world slowed down. I felt every drop of sweat on my back, every breath catching in my lungs. This wasn't just about a conversation. This was the moment I'd been running from. The moment I had to decide who I was and what kind of future I wanted for my child. I nodded once. "We'll talk justice." Caleb didn't flinch. He gave one slow nod, turned, and walked back toward the barn. June hesitated, then followed. We sat at the picnic table beneath the oak tree, the vineyard stretching behind us like a painting I no longer knew how to read. Nate leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know I screwed up," he began, "but I haven't stopped thinking about you, about the baby." I was scared. "Yeah, but that doesn't mean I don't want to make this right now." "You keep saying make it right," I said, folding my arms. "But what does that even mean to you?" "Airing a nursery in some apartment. Pretending the last 6 months DIDN single quotes THAP pen. No." He said quickly. "I mean, maybe someday, but more than that, I want a part of your life, their life. I want to be there when the baby's born. I want to hold them, name them. I don't care if you hate me. I just don't want to miss of everything." I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were glassy, voice thick with emotion. And for a moment, I felt that old ache tug at my ribs. That part of me that once loved him, Thaddeus believed in late-night phone calls and plans made over cheap dinner pancakes. But then I thought of Caleb, of the way he held my hand in silence when words were too sharp, of how he let me grieve and grow and falter without ever once making me feel small, of how he looked at me like I wasn't a mistake, but a person worth staying for. "You left, Nate," I said, my voice trembling, not just physically. "You vanished. I was scared and sick and drowning, and you let me go under. And now you want to be a hero because the consequences are real." He looked down. "I'm not asking for forgiveness overnight. Just a chance." "And what about Caleb?" I asked. "He's been here every single day, quiet, kind, patient. He didn't create this life, but he stepped into it without hesitation. Do you even know what that takes?" Silence. "I still love AO, Sophie," Nate whispered. I never stopped. And maybe once that would have shattered me. Maybe once I would have clung to that sentence like a rope out off drowning. But now I don't, I say quietly. "I don't love you anymore. It grieved you." I buried that version of us. What's left? It's not enough. His fist crumpled for a second, then reset. He stood, nodded stiffly, and turned to leave. I didn't watch him drive away. It just stared at the vineyard. My hand resting on my belly, the baby shift tenderly beneath my palm like a silent affirmation. When Caleb came back later, he didn't ask what I'd said. He just handed me a folded blanket and sat beside me on the porch. We watched the stars rise over the treetops. I told him I didn't love him anymore, I said. After a while, Caleb didn't look at me. "Waste that hard?" Yes and no. I turned to him, but I meant it. He nodded, not smiling, not celebrating, just steady. And mentally, I reached for his hand. It felt like choosing a future. The days that followed felt lighter, like someone had opened a window and let the stale air out. Nate was gone, not just physically, but from the space he'd occupied and mimed. I'd said the words I needed to say. Closed the chapter that had been bleeding through every page of my present, and somehow, without fanfare or fireworks, I felt free. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Caleb was always up before the sun, out in the fields before the FRST light touched the vines. One morning, I made him coffee and brought it out just as he was heading toward Thebern. He looked surprised, but in that quiet Caleb way that only showed in this light. Raise of his eyebrows and the way his mouth softened at the corners. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, I replied, but I wanted to. He nodded, took the cup, and stood there for a moment like he wasn't sure whether to keep walking or say something else. And then he didn't say anything. He just drank slowly and passed the mug back when he was done. The house began to feel more like mine. I started drawing small things. Nothing dramatic, just a vase here, a cookbook there. I folded baby clothes that Aaron had dropped off in a brown paper bag, sorting them by size and season. I sat in the floor of the nursery we hadn't finished yet, surrounded by pastel cotton and the smell of cedar, and imagined what it would be like to rock my child to sleep in that room. Caleb found me there one afternoon. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking around like he wasn't sure he belonged. You okay? He asked. Just thinking, I said. Then after a pause, do you want to paint the walls with me? He blinked. I don't know much about color palettes. I don't either. Let's get together. He chuckled low and warm and stepped inside. We painted in comfortable silence, stopping only when Erin showed up with lemonade and cookies. She didn't say much, just grinned when she saw us splattered in blue and green, and muttered something about domestic bliss under her breath. Later that night, Caleb and I sat on the back porch again. The sky was turning gold, then lavender, then that deep endless blue that only existed in this valley. I had a blanket over my lap and sat close enough that our arms touched. Not deliberately, not dramatically, just there. I've never done this before, I said softly. Built something, stayed in one place, belonged. Caleb didn't answer right away. Then he said, neither have I, no truly. I turned to him. But this feels like something, doesn't it? He made mais, it does. The next morning he made pancakes. They were slightly burnt, uneven in shape, and somehow the best he'd ever had. When I asked what the occasion was, he said nothing. Just it's a Saturday. But I knew what he meant. It wasn't the day, it was us. The shape we're beginning to take. That evening, I fell asleep on the couch with a book in me lap. I woke to FNDA blanket draped over me, a cup of tea on the table, and Caleb's handwriting on a small scrap of paper, back in the feld. Don't overdo it. You matter, you matter. 2 words, no hearts, no flowery declarations. But they hit harder than any love letter I'd ever received, and for the FRST time in a long, long time I believed it. That first contraction hit at 3:42 in the morning. At FRST, I thought it was just a cramp. One of the false alarms I'd been warned about. But when the second dome came 12 minutes later, sharp and low and radiating through my spine like a wave breaking inside me, I sat up in bed, heart racing. I pressed my palm. Tummy belly, whispering, not yet, baby, just wait a little longer. But she wasn't waiting. I walked to the kitchen, gripping the counter as the next contraction rolled through me. June followed at my heels, pacing nervously. I fumbled for my phone with one hand and called Caleb. He answered on the first ring. Sophie, I think it's time, he whispered. He didn't ask questions. I'll be right there. 15 minutes later, headlights swept across the porch. Caleb brushed in barefoot, his flannel shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide but focused, bags ready. I nodded, too winded to speak. He helped me to the truck, onium steady around my back. The pain came faster now, sharper like some peeling threads from the inside out. I breathed like they taught me, and I'll count to 4 again. He didn't say much during the drive, just kept glancing over at me. His jaw set, one hand white-knuckled on the wheel. Talk to me, I say between gasps. Say anything, please. He cleared his throat. Okay, did you know grapes have to struggle a little to make good wine? I blinked at him. What? It's true. If they get too much water, too much comfort, the flavor gets watered down. But if the roots have ever dig deep, if they have to eft, they grow stronger. The fruit is more concentrated, richer. I let out a shaky laugh that turned into a groan. Are you saying I'm a grape? I'm saying you're the strongest thing I've ever seen. We reached the clinic just as the pain became unbearable. Nurses moved fast, machines beeped, lights blazed, but Caleb never left an aside. He held my hand, whispered my name when the contractions peaked, pressed a cool cloth to my forehead, even when it snapped at him to stop. You're doing great, he said, voice raw. I hate you, I growled through gritted teeth. I know, he said, not even flinching. Still hear hours blurred. Pain, breath, sweat, silence, another wave, and then she washer. A cry high and sharp like a trumpet through fog. And then the world collapsed around that sound. The nurse laid her on. My chest, slick and pink and trembling with life, and I sobbed. I couldn't stop. Everything I'd held in for months, the fear, the guilt, the longing, the grief, it broke open all at once. And in the middle of it all washer, I looked at Caleb. He wasn't smiling. He was crying silently like he didn't want me to see, but the tears were there, streaking down his unshaven cheeks. He reached out, hesitated, and then rested one hand gently on her tiny back. "Hi there," he whispered. "Welcome you to the world, little one." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my heart swollen beyond recognition. Later, when the nurses left us alone, I turned to him. The room was dim. Quiet now. Just the sound of our daughter's breath and the slow beeping of machines. "Thank you," I said. "You don't have to." "I do." I looked at him, really looked. "You didn't have Edo be here, but you were every step." He sat beside me on the edge of the bed, one hand resting near mine. "I didn't do this for a thank you," he said. "I did it because I couldn't imagine not doing it." We sat in silence watching her sleep. She had my nose, his mouth, maybe. Or maybe I just wanted her to have some part of him too. "I've been thinking about names," I said softly. "Oh, what about June?" He blinked. "After the dog." I smiled. "After the season." After the calm that came before everything changed. I nodded. June. It sounded right. And just like that, we became a family. The house felt different now. Maybe it was the crib in the corner of the bedroom, or tiny socks drying by the sink, or the way light fell through the curtains and landed on Caleb's shoulder, as he held June in the early mornings. Or maybe it was me. Maybe I had changed in ways I couldn't name yet, but felt with every breath. Our daughter was 2 weeks old, and already she rearranged the molecules of our world. She cried in the middle of the night, and I cried with her. I laughed when she hiccuped, marveled when she gripped my Efgar, panicked at every sneeze, but I wasn't alone. Caleb was always there, quiet, constant present. He made breakfast with own hand and cradled her in the other. He sang old country songs of Key Wench, fussed, bouncing her gently against this chest. Sometimes I would just watch him from the doorway, overwhelmed by how natural it all looked on him. "You're good at this," I told him once. He looked up, brow furrowed. At what? At being audited. His face softened, but he didn't say anything. He just kissed the top of her head and kept rocking. We spent long hours on the porch. June sleeping on my chest while Caleb worked on the nursery bookshelf. He built it from scratch, real wood, not the cheap fate pack kind. Each shelf was smooth, sanded with care, corners rounded, stained a soft honey color. One afternoon I sat watching him while he attached the last piece. The vineyard stretched behind him, rose off green turning gold as August drifted toward September. There was sawdust on his forearms and sweat on his collarbone, and something inside niched, not from pain, but from the terrifying, beautiful realization that I was falling in love. "I want to stay," I say quietly. He looked up. "What?" "I want to stay," I repeated. "Not just for a while. Not just until I figure things out. I want this life. I want you." Caleb didn't move, didn't speak for a long time. He sat down the screwdriver, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked over to me. He didn't say anything grand, no speeches, no declarations. He just cupid me face gently like I might still break if he wasn't careful and whispered, "You already have me." We kissed. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't wild. It was sweet and sure like everything else between us, like breathing, like home. That night, after June fell asleep in her bassinet, I unpacked the last box. The one I kept sealed since I arrived, the box of books and notebooks and half-written dreams. I placed my favorite volumes on the new bookshelf Caleb had built. I stacked my journals in. The drawer of the writing desk had cleared for me. I had a desk now, a place to write, to think, to grow roots. Later, as we lay in bed with June between us, her tiny breath rising and falling, Caleb brushed a curl from my forehead. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Miss what?" "Your old life, the city, the museum." I thought about it. The way Boston pulsed with energy. The thrill of walking into an archive, the academic debates, the old brick buildings, and how all of that had once deafened me. A little, I said honestly, but not the way I thought I would. He nodded. "You don't have to give it up." "I know," I said, turning toward him. "But for the first time, I don't feel like I'm running from something. I'm running toward it. Hesnal, just a small one, but it lit up the whole room. Outside, the wind rustled through the vines. Somewhere in the darkness, the world kept turning. Inside, we were still huddled together. I waited until the house was quiet. June had finally gone. Down after her third feeding. Curled into a tiny crescent in the bassinet beside our bed. Caleb had fallen asleep on the couch, book still open on his chest. One arm hanging down where June's stooped bunny had fallen. The night was thick with crickets. And the scent of ripe grapes drifted in through the open window. I lit a single lamp, sat at the old writing desk, and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. My fingers hovered over the page for a long time before I began. Dear Dad, it's been a while. I thought about calling, but I'm not sure you'd answer. And even if you did, I don't know if I could say everything out loud without losing the shape of it. So I'm writing instead. You always said letters were more deliberate anyway. Less room for saying something you didn't mean. So here it is. All of it. When you sent me away, I hated you. I know that's harsh, but it's the truth. I was scared and alone. And instead of asking me what I needed, you handed me like a problem. To be managed like I was some scandal to best smooth over with a marriage contract and a one-way ticket. I don't think you meant to hurt me. I think you truly believed you were saving me, that you were preserving what could be salvaged, but what you didn't realize is what you were trying to save was never mine. It was yours. Your image, your place in the community, your version of how a daughter should live. But here's separate one didn't expect to write. Thank you, not because it was right. It wasn't, but because it brought me here. To a little vineyard in Oregon, to a man who says more with silence than most people do with paragraphs. To a baby girl who looks at me like I'm her entire world. Dad, I'm happy. Not in the way you used to preach about from Thepple Not because I followed the rules or did the honorable thing, but because I broke, and in the breaking I found something softer, stronger. I'm not asking you to understand it. I'm not even asking you to accept it. But I wanted you to know that I'm okay, better than okay. I've built a life here that doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like peace. Her name is June. She has Sire Chin. If you ever want to meet her, you're welcome here. No conditions, no luras. Just come as you are, like Ifnally. Have with love. Sophie. I folded the letter fully and slid it into an envelope. I didn't seal it right away, just sat there, tracing the name I'd written on the front. Reverend Thomas Chandler, my father. He might never read it. He might toss it the moment he saw the return address. Or maybe he'd sit in his study like he always did, reading items twice, maybe 3 times before tucking it into the back of his Bible. I'd never know for sure. But I didn't write it for him, I wrote it for me. That girl who once believed her value wasted to obedience. The woman who learned it was rooted in choice. When I finally sealed the envelope, I stood, walked to the porch, and sat under the stars. The vineyard was quiet, the wind had died down. All I could hear was the rhythm of my own breath and the soft weight of something sacred settling into place. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer owned me. The vines turned gold, but I realized summer was over. It happened slowly, one leaf at a time, until the whole valley looked like it had been dipped in honey. The air turned crisp in the mornings. June started sleeping longer through the night, and I began to notice things I hadn't before. How Caleb always took his coffee with just a touch of cinnamon. How the old floorboard in the hallway creaked on my win. You stepped on it barefoot. How the vineyard smelled different every week as fruit ripened toward harvest. This was our FRST autumn as a family. No big announcement, no deafening moment. Just quiet unfolding of something real. We took long walks through the rows off ones with June bundled in a sling against my chest. Caleb would carry a basket, picking late grapes, sending me one. Without a word, I started bringing my notebook again, not to escape, but to remember. I didn't want to forget any of it. The way Caleb tucked hair behind my ear when I bent over to tie my boot. The sound of June's slaw when he made faces at her during breakfast. The way the porch creaked when we rocked her to sleep in the fitting light. One afternoon I found Caleb in the barn sanding a piece off wood. I leaned against the door frame watching him work. What are you making? I asked. He looked up smiling softly. A cradle? Thought we could keep it for when she's too big for the bassinet. She's growing fast. Yeah, she's. I stepped closer, ran my hand over the smooth curve of the wood. Thank you, I said. For what? For making space. for letting this happen slowly. He set the cinder down, turned to face me. It didn't feel slow to me. It felt inevitable. I reached for his hand. I love you, Caleb. He didn't blink, didn't it? I know, I've known. I laughed, resting my forehead against his. That's not how it's supposed to go. You're supposed to say it back. I do, he whispered. Every time I stay, every time I wake up beside you, every time I put another shelf in the nursery or rock her to sleep. I've been saying it all along. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering a few amber leaves across the porch. Inside, June stirred, then settled again. That night, we sat under the stars with a blanket around her shoulders and her daughter sleeping between. U.S. Kel pointed up at a bright cluster near the horizon. See that? He said, Orion's belt. I thought you only knew grapevines. He smiled. Turns out I know more than I thought. I looked at him, then up at the stars, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the kind that burned fast and bright like it did with Nate. This was different. This was slow and warm and steady. The kind you build things with. I used to think love had to be loud, that it had to be heard. But no, I knew sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one that asks for nothing and stays anyway. I rested my head on Caleb's shoulder and he kissed the top of mine. This is enough, I said, and nodded. More than enough. And it wasn't the life I planned, but the life he chose.